The inspection of the aftmost main bearing requires a change in procedure. As there is no cranked throw to which the lifting tools can be attached, the lifting tools must be attached to the chain wheel. To simplify the dismantling of the aftmost main bearing cap, remove the small cover over the main bearing on the outside of the engine so that the wire rope can be passed through the opening down to the main bearing cap. Be careful when using this feeler gauge, as in certain circumstances it can scratch the bearing metal. Make sure that you wear protective goggles and gloves when working with the hydraulic tools under pressure. Rig up tackles so that the foremost bearing cap can be lifted right out of the engine. Do not lift the aftmost bearing cap out of the engine, simply lift it up and secure it along the frame box wall. Take special care that no damage occurs to the bearing shells while they are being removed. It is important that the location of the markings on the bearing shells be noted so that the shells can be reinstalled in the correct position. Mount a lifting tool above the chain wheel so that the clearance required to turn the bottom shell upwards can be obtained. Once the chain wheel has been turned to the relevant position, mount the pulling stud. After mounting the hydraulic jack, make sure that it bears firmly and evenly on the entire contact surface. Check that the side clearances are sufficient to allow the free movement of the bottom shell during its dismantling. Using the jack, push the crankshaft sideways until a side clearance of at least 0.05 of a millimetre is obtained. To extract the bottom shell, mount two special silk wires on opposite sides of the shell. Pull on one wire to roll the shell out and on the other wire to steady the shell. If the bearing shell meets resistance while it is being rolled out, roll it slightly back by pulling on the other wire. Ensure that the main bearing saddle and journal are completely clean before reinstalling the main bearing. It is important to ensure that the main bearing shells are reinstalled in the positions indicated by the markings. Once the bearing shell has been turned down into place, remove the wires and adjust the position of the shell before relieving the hydraulic tool of pressure. Ensure that the area around the main bearing studs and the threads of the studs are carefully cleaned before tightening the main bearing. When all oil pipes have been mounted, remove all tackles and tools from the engine and reinstall the covers and doors. Overhaul of fuel valves on 46, 50 and 60 MC engines. See Instruction Book, Volume 2, Procedure numbers 901 and 909. Before any dismantling, drain the fuel oil from the fuel oil high pressure pipes. Using a hook spanner, loosen the union nut. Using a spanner, loosen the coupling pieces fitted on each end of the high pressure pipe. The fuel oil high pressure pipes may also be of the double pipe design. See Instruction Book, Procedure numbers 901 and 909. Remove the high pressure pipe. Take care not to damage the high pressure pipe seatings. Disconnect the return oil pipe from the fuel valve. Mount protective plastic plugs in or on all high pressure seatings. Unscrew the retaining nuts and remove the spring housings. Remove the fuel valve from the cylinder cover using the lifting tool if the valve sticks. Thoroughly clean the fuel valve bore in the cylinder cover. Clean off any carbon deposits in the fuel valve bore with a carbon cutter. If marks are found on the seating in the bore, recondition the seating with a seating face cutter. Finally, grind the seating with a grinding mandrel and a grinding compound, for example carborundum number 200. After milling and grinding, thoroughly clean the bore and seating and check again that there are no signs of damage on the seating. After reconditioning the seating in the bore and thoroughly cleaning both bore and seating, Fit new O-rings on a new or overhaul fuel valve which has just been pressure tested and lubricate with molybdenum disulfide. Carefully mount the valve in the cylinder cover. To ensure that over-tightening has not taken place, check that the locking and indicating pins have not been bent or broken off. In the event of over-tightening, mount a new spring housing. We recommend that the calibration of new and especially old spring housings be checked before they are mounted on the engine or on the fuel valve test rig. Mount the spring housings and retaining nuts. Tighten the nuts until the top face of the pressure disc is flush with the top face of the spring housing. Reconnect the return oil pipe to the fuel valve. Check that there are no marks on the seating surfaces of the fuel oil high pressure pipe. If necessary, recondition the seatings as described in procedure number 909. On fuel oil high pressure pipes which are provided with a steel armoured protective hose, also check distance D, that is between the thrust bushing and the pipe end. See procedure number 909. Replace the O-rings and coat with molybdenum disulfide. Mount the fuel oil high pressure pipe. Adjust the torque spanner to the value indicated in procedure number 901. Tighten the coupling pieces using the torque spanner. Using the hook spanner, tighten the union nut. Close the fuel oil drain valve. Turn on the fuel oil supply. Remove and discard all sealing rings. Fit soft jaws to the bench vise. Set up the fuel valve. Start disassembling the fuel valve by screwing off the union nut with a hook spanner. Slide the valve head clear of the valve housing. Remove the thrust spindle and thrust foot from the valve housing. Loosen the spindle guide with a soft hammer and remove the spindle guide and nozzle. Remove the sealing ring from the spindle guide. Disassemble the spindle guide with a brass mandrel and a hammer. Set up the thrust spindle in a bench vise with soft jaws. Compress the spring for the thrust spindle to remove the tension on the circlips, and then remove the circlips. Clean all parts in gas oil and blow clean with compressed air. Carefully clean and examine the parts and, if necessary, grind the seating surfaces with a grinding mandrel and carborundum number 500. Use a torch to inspect the internal seating surface of the valve housing. Use a torch to inspect the internal seating surface of the valve housing. Use the milling tool if more serious damage has occurred on the seating surface for the high pressure pipe in the valve head. The diameter of the seating surface must not exceed the value stated in procedure number 909 in volume 2 of the instruction book. After grinding and milling, clean the parts in gas oil and blow clean with compressed air. Inspect all spindle guide seating surfaces through a magnifying glass. If pressing in marks or the like are found on the seating surfaces, mount a new spindle guide. The lapping of internal parts is not acceptable. Individual defective parts cannot be replaced except for the spring. Remove any deposits on the sliding surfaces with a grade 360 emery cloth and oil. Use the special drills to clean off any carbon deposits in the central bore of the fuel valve nozzle or in the spray hose. Test the spray holes with a test pin. If the test pin can be inserted into just one of the holes, or if the holes have become oval, the fuel nozzle must be discarded. Loosely assemble the spindle guide. Lubricate all movable parts with molybdenum disulfide. Make sure that the parts are perfectly aligned and position the special tool. Fit the parts firmly together by pressing down on the drilling machine handle. Move the handle of the drilling machine up and down to check that the internal parts are able to move freely. Starting with any additional discs, assemble the thrust spindle. Slightly compress the thrust spring and mount the circlips. Mount the fuel nozzle in the valve housing, making sure that it engages correctly with the guide pin. Mount a new sealing ring on the spindle guide. Coat with molybdenum disulfide and mount the spindle guide and thrust foot. Mount the thrust spindle with the circlips facing the spindle guide. Mount a new sealing ring in the sealing ring groove. Mount the valve head, ensuring that the guide pin between the valve housing and valve head is correctly engaged so that it will prevent the parts from turning in relation to each other. Mount the union nut and tighten it with a hook spanner. Mount new sealing rings on the valve head and valve housing and mount protective plastic plugs. Overhauled fuel valves or fuel valves taken from stock must be function tested before they are mounted in the cylinder cover. The pressure testing pump is equipped with pressure gauges for displaying opening pressure, working pressure, venting function and air inlet pressure. Position the fuel valve in the test rig. For guidance on how to operate the pressure testing pump, refer to the supplier's special instructions. To ensure that over-tightening has not taken place, check that the locking and indicating pins have not been bent or broken off. In the event of over-tightening, mount a new spring housing. A very important element in the correct functioning of the fuel valve, both during testing and in service, is ensuring that the spring housings apply the predetermined tightening force. To ensure that this force is present, a special tool has been designed to check the calibration of the spring housings. We recommend that the calibration of new and especially old spring housings be checked before they are mounted on the engine or on the fuel valve test rig. Tighten the nuts until the top face of the pressure disc is flush with the top face of the spring housing. Connect the pressure testing pump and the return oil pipe to the fuel valve. Slowly fill the valve by pumping at low pressure until oil, without air bubbles, flows from the return oil pipe. Raise the pressure until it is above the opening pressure. Flush the valve for about 5 seconds. Slowly increase the pressure until it is about 50 bar below the specified opening pressure. See Instruction Book Volume 2, Procedure number 909. There will always be a certain amount of oil flowing from the return oil pipe when the fuel valve is full of oil and pressurized. Oil must not seep from the fuel valve nozzle holes until reaching a pressure of 50 bar below the specified opening pressure. If oil does seep from the fuel valve nozzles, see Procedure number 909. Lapping of the internal seatings is not acceptable. Pump 5 to 10 strokes to fully open the valve and to blow out any dirt. Then relieve the pressure. Slowly increase the pressure until oil is emitted from all the atomizer holes. Read the actual opening pressure on the pressure gauge marked opening pressure. Compare the actual opening pressure with the pressure specified in Procedure number 909 and, if necessary, insert or remove discs or replace the spring. Set up the thrust spindle in a bench vise with soft jaws. Compress the spring for the thrust spindle to remove the tension on the circlips and then remove the circlips. Starting with any additional discs, assemble the thrust spindle. Do not insert more than 5 extra discs when adjusting the pressure. Slightly compress the thrust spring and mount the circlips. The fuel valve must be retested after any adjustments. If the quick pressure drop cannot be registered, the slide is sticking or the hole is blocked. Disassemble and examine the parts, replace if necessary. Slowly fill the valve by pumping at low pressure until oil, without air bubbles, flows from the return oil pipe. Remove the return oil pipe and block the outlet hole with a gasket and a plug screw. Increase the pressure to about 100 bar and move the control handle to the closed position. The pressure should now remain at 100 bar. If oil leaks at the union nut, replace the O-ring seal of the valve head. If oil leaks at the lower end of the valve, replace the O-ring seal on the spindle guide. After the fuel valve has passed all the tests, it can be mounted in the cylinder cover. Dismount all high-pressure pipes, drain pipes, etc. Land the cylinder cover tightening tool on the cylinder cover. Lift the spacer rings off the holders and mount them around the cylinder cover nuts. Pull down the hydraulic tools, which are suspended from the spring balancers, and screw them onto the cylinder cover studs. Screw the hydraulic tool back half a turn. See also Volume 2, Chapter 913. Remove the protective plastic caps from the hydraulic couplings and connect the hydraulic hoses. Start the hydraulic high-pressure pump and vent the system at the distributor blocks and hydraulic tools. When oil without air bubbles flows from the vent screws, tighten the screws. Raise the pressure slowly until the nuts can be loosened with a tummy bar. Relieve the system of pressure. Disconnect the high pressure hoses, mount protective plastic caps and place the hoses in the holders. Unscrew the hydraulic tools and, using the spring balancers, return them to their upper position. Return the spacer rings to the holders. Unscrew the nuts. Take the crane hook off the tightening tool. Fit the crane hook onto the lifting eye bolt and lift off the cylinder cover and tool. Land the cylinder cover on a couple of wooden planks. Mount a new sealing ring on top of the cylinder liner and bend the 3 tabs on the sealing ring with a lead hammer. Mount new sealing rings on the cooling water connections and lubricate with grease or soft soap. Clean the cylinder cover and lubricate with grease or soft soap. Land the cylinder cover, making sure that the cooling water connecting pipes catch the holes in the cooling jacket correctly. Remove the crane hook. Tighten the nuts with a Tommy bar. Place the spacer ring in such a position that the Tommy bar for tightening the nut can be applied through the slot. Press the piston and cylinder of the jack firmly together. Start the hydraulic high pressure pump and vent the system at the distributor blocks and hydraulic tools. When oil without air bubbles flows from the vent screws, tighten the screws. Raise the pressure to 900 bar and tighten the nuts with the Tommy bar. Maintain the pressure and check with a feeler gauge that the nuts bear against the contact face. Relieve the system of pressure and disconnect the high pressure hoses. Lift away the cylinder cover tightening tool and mount all high pressure pipes, drain pipes, etc. The variable injection timing system comprises VIT actuators located on the fuel pumps and pneumatic components located on the control console at the side of the engine. Supply 7 bar control air pressure to the pneumatic components on the engine side console. Switch control from the engine room to the engine side console. Turn the regulating hand wheel until the tapered slots of the 2 levers are aligned. The throttle non-return valve must be fully open before adjusting the VIT system. Loosen the lock nut and screw the spindle counterclockwise as far as it will go. Make sure that the pressurized air reaches the VIT actuator. It may be necessary to switch the changeover valve manually. The pilot valve must be adjusted so that when the spindle is pressed 8 millimeters inwards, the control air pressure will be 5.5 bar. Turn the regulating hand wheel so that the steel bar just touches the pilot valve. Insert a distance piece with a thickness of precisely 8 millimeters. If the control air pressure deviates from 5.5 bar, loosen the lock screw and turn the spring retainer cap of the pilot valve until the pressure, which can be read on the pressure gauge on the engine side control console, reads 5.5 bar. Note that it will not be possible to obtain the correct pressure if the throttle non-return valve is not fully open. Screw the spindle clockwise until a pressure drop can just be registered. Screw the spindle counterclockwise 1 revolution and lock it in this position with a lock nut. This position prevents a sudden increase in VIT index and thereby a sudden increase in the maximum combustion pressure. Make sure that the